especially given the business that you are in, the kind of stress that the system is going through. Actually, I wonder how you sleep. On the one hand, you have to take tough decisions like ENAM, where people criticize for paying a high valuation, or even the very purpose of doing the transaction. On the other, you have to deal with the risks that come with the macros of high NPAs and the stress that comes along with it. You have to face these challenges. You can't push them under the carpet. You have to say that, yes, indeed, I carry this stress in my, in my balance sheet. So how do you really, first of all, how do you sleep? How do you handle the stress? And how do you really take your company forward from each of these, I would say, doubts that the system may throw at you? Again, I would really like to use all of your experience for everybody in other businesses as well. These kind of stresses most businesses go through. And many people think that, let's look at shortcuts, let's look at postponing, accepting a problem, or let's not even take on tough challenges. If my board doesn't want me to do something, why should I even bother? But all of these are wrong ways of building a business because you're systematically decaying. There is only one way to build a business, which is to have a good vision, back it up with a good strategy, have trust in the team, get the confidence of the ecosystem, and move on, and take all the stress as though your nerves are made of steel. So if you can share how you de-stress, from where do you get this courage, that would be really helpful.
Such a lot of questions, Renu. I don't know where to start. In terms of how do I de-stress, let me start with that because that's the simplest one. First of all, I've never had a problem sleeping. So I sleep my 8 hours a day and without any difficulties. I think for a woman and maybe for a guy as well, what helps is that you go back from work and you go home and you have children to play with, you have a spouse to talk to, you have family to worry about. So automatically you end up switching off, right? Because there's something else that you have to focus on. And yes, it takes a bit of training to do that, but by the time I enter the house, I try not to think about the office. And by the time I leave home, yes, that's when I start thinking about office. So the ability to switch on and off is critical. And it's critical to stress management. It's also critical to renewal. And that travel from home to office lets me prepare for the day at office. But when I'm at home, I'm switched off and thinking about other stuff and recharging to think about the next day is basically the fundamental mechanism that I would say I use to deal with stress. But the other thing is that I think I've got a support system of friends who I trust, not too many, but a few, who I would go and pour out whatever is bothering me. You've been a beneficiary of a lot of that pour out many times. But once it's poured out, it's like poison out of the system, right? It's out there over and then my mind is freed and I can start being creative again. So I think you need a support system of people who you can trust and you can share everything right, wrong. Sometimes you know what you're doing, sometimes you don't know what you're doing, but you can be completely open and candid with them in terms of trying to figure that out. That's important. And if your friends are real friends, then they will tell you when you've got it wrong. And I think over the years, I've figured out which of my friends are able to push back and tell me when I'm not getting it right. And those are the ones that I would go out and seek a lot more. And that's why you get counted on so much, Renu. But I think that, again, is a part of de-stressing. That's also a part of how to deal with some of the external pressures, right? Because one of the things that constantly worries me is that, will I fail because I don't listen? Will I fail because I've made up my mind and I don't change it when I should have changed it? I just talked about not being a leaf in the wind and getting carried away. Yeah. Being a leaf in the wind is bad. But being somebody who's so rigid that I'm wedded to a point of view which has now become extinct and useless is also not a good place to be in, because especially in the world which changes so rapidly, I have to be willing to adjust my beliefs and my goals over a period of time. So, and since you worked with me for a long time, you would know that with my team, if they don't know me, I sometimes come across as volatile. And people will say, oh, you know, she said this yesterday and she's saying something else. But then when they work with me long enough, they know that it's not volatility. It's really that I have an idea in my head. At that point of time, it's a hypothesis. And I come and test it with you. I come and test it with a couple of other people who I trust. And based on the response that I get, I adjust that idea. And therefore, in the early phases, it may look like she's changing her idea. But actually, it is a hypothesis which I'm developing into an idea. Once the hypothesis developed into an idea, then I can have the confidence to execute. So in that early period, I think it's important that I have a hypothesis. But it's important that I get enough input to check whether that hypothesis can be converted into an idea or not. And then stay the course unless, you know, you just get a massive pushback and you figure out the world has changed. So developing the sensing skills, the listening skills, and synthesizing and thinking deeply about the issue. And once you're confident moving and executing, that's broadly the way I've lived my life so far.
Decoding Shikha's success as a business leader, what I have learned is how to be a great listener, how to operate with gut. At the same time, test your gut and with the inputs that you're getting in the market. And because she is a good listener, she is able to listen honestly. All of us listen. I mean, everything goes into our ear. But how it gets processed somewhere in the upper deck, we make a mistake, either because of ego or because of our, inability to really decipher the information as something contrary to your intuition, you know, that we don't want to really modify that idea. Applying judgment, having a gut is very, very important, but also listening candidly to what the market has to say is probably much more important in being a successful leader.